Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Uh, did you miss me? Well, I do miss you all, and that's why I'm here. I was supposed to be still resting because I was very, very tired for the past few days. But here we are. My schedule is always a mess because, like, last week I already decided to have a proper schedule for this week from Sunday to Saturday, which is today. But things happened, and the only things that I was able to. Oh, hello, Happy Bread, and hello, Shi and Kaguru. Welcome, welcome. So I only was able to like do a few of my scheduled stuff, like for example, Mystic Monday, and then tonight our book reading, which I am very late to because I usually schedule my book reading at 5 p.m. But yeah, it's like 7:45 and we're just starting. And all that, it's because of, family things that I have no control over. And yeah, we just have to roll with it. But yeah, how are you? How is everyone? I hope that you are having a great weekend. Well, it's the first day of the weekend, and I hope that you're all resting, vibing, and chilling. That is great. Great for everyone. As for me, as I've said, I'm supposed to be resting right now because whoa, it was really stressful these past few days because when was it? Like on Wednesday, my aunt and her family arrived from a different country, but I was not available to go with them because I had work. So everyone else, aside from me and my mother, went and picked them up at the airport. They stayed there overnight, blah blah blah, and like my mother is having issues with her health, as you may already know. So I was the one taking care of her, like on that day, last Friday, and then I mean Thursday, and then yesterday, and she was having some issues, and we had to bring her to the emergency room yesterday. So, yeah, I didn't have any sleep at all. And that's why yesterday I was not able to stream. Same with Thursday, because Thursday I couldn't really stream because, our relatives just arrived. Everyone's so noisy. Even if I close my room, you would be able to hear them, chatting and laughing. So I was like, yeah, I'll just stream on Friday. And then that happened. So I wasn't able to stream yesterday. I was just like sitting and trying to rest myself. Hello, Conjurix and Shiroi Kunshu. Hi, welcome to the stream. I was just like, you know, talking about why we're only doing our stream right now. And even today, I was also planning to not stream, but yeah, here we are anyway. I do not want to miss our book reading because today we are going to start with the part 4, chapter 18 of the book we're reading, Renato Constantino's The Philippines, A Past Revisited. So I hope you're all ready for that. Because I am. I'm ready for it. I'm very excited to get back to reading and get back to talking to you guys. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I figured so because I don't want to bring the mood down. It's been really hard for me these past few months because of my mother's situation. I always have to like stop streaming for a minimum of 1 week at a time whenever she gets confined at the hospital, and it happens like every other month or so. So like now, it's almost a routine, and it's not just my streaming that stops. I also have a day job. I also have to stop working because no one else will take care of my mother at the hospital. And yeah, at this point, I'm just like very, very, well, physically tired, but I'm still going to obviously prioritize that, and that's also something that I would like to, advise people whenever you have to choose between the people you love and, let's say, your career or things that you feel like, oh no, there's no other chance for this, blah blah blah. I would always say that you have to choose the people that you love, because I know at least two people who are my age, and their biggest regret is not being there enough for their parents that they actually love. It's a case to case basis. I know not everyone would have a good relationship with their parent, but like, yeah, if you have a good relationship with your parents or your siblings and things are going that way, always choose them. And yeah. Anyway, aside from the sad stuff, I've also been trying to catch up on my reading. Aside from, the academic stuff, I've been reading manga again and watching anime and, what do you call this? K-dramas again. Like, I haven't done that in a long while because of all the things that's been happening in my life, but like, I'm trying to get back to the things that I enjoy. Like, for example, I was already able to finish reading Shingeki no Kyojin last week. I also caught up to the latest chapter of Black Butler, two manga series that I've stopped reading for a long, long time. And also, I finished Doctor Stone finally, because like I stopped reading those a few years back, either because something happened in the story that put me off, or I just can't wait for the next chapter, and it's kind of slow, so I kind of forgot about it. But yeah, we're all caught up in those main mangas that I've been reading. Also, what else? I've been I've been caught up with Doctor Stone's anime. I already finished season 2 and the special episode. I'm like, yay! Hello, Myeon-san. Hi, hi, hi. What else? Oh, I've been watching a lot of short web series. Let me see. Which one would I highly recommend? Oh, I'm currently waiting for new episodes of these ongoing series. The first one is Gap the series, which is a Thai drama that stars what's her name? Becky Armstrong and Freen. So there's that. And they're kind of visiting the Philippines this month. I won't be going. They're too expensive. But I enjoy watching their show. What else? I'm also currently waiting for the next episode of Love in the Future. So for those of you who know me, I don't really like watching, what do you call this? Love stories in general. But I figured out later in life that it's not that I don't like love stories. I just need something more than a love story. And Love in the Future has this cute little thing wherein a man from the year 2000 who like does odd jobs like riding in his scooter delivering stuff, and then one day he just gets yeeted into 2022, like, you know, pandemic era, and then he's like very, very confused, and he assumes the identity of this modern man who happens to be like a delivery guy who also rides on a scooter. So basically he's your what do you call this, it's not an angkas, but I forgot. It's kind of like a food panda delivery guy. That's his new personality. And then someone else knows him as like this current person. It's just kind of wild. But the thing that I finished last night, what's that? It's a Korean web series called The Director Who Buys Me Dinner. And I'm planning to watch the manhwa where it was based on, but basically, without revealing too much, the director waited for this person for 300 years, and he's like insisting, now we must date because I have to fall in love with you properly, blah blah blah, because they were cursed by the god or whatsoever. And yeah, that is the plot of that. Like, younger me would have laughed at like the thought of me reading or watching romance stuff, but now that I'm older, I'm like, yeah, romance is not all that bad as long as like there's other things going on in the plot aside from just two people or three like pushing and pulling. Anyway, that aside, if you do have like recommendations for either web series, oh my god, why are the Sigbins screaming in the background? Web series or anime or manga that you would like to suggest, you can always just at me on Twitter, or you can comment here on the chat. Anyway, let me just take off my... Hold on. Oh god. Oh Oh my god. I think it's the neighbors. I'm gonna just let them scream. Shh. Shush, children. Okay, they won't shut up. Let me just. Are they done? Are they done? Myeon, can you like ask your cousins to keep quiet? Oh god. No, here we are. Anyway, I am going to take you all to my reading screen. Here we go. And there we go. I'm wearing my special round glasses so that we can read properly. And yeah, this is part 4, prologue, chapter 18. Okay. Oh my god, they would not shut up. Shh. For some reason, they're very, very loud. Okay. Are they done? They done? They done? Okay, I guess so. Oh no, they're not. Okay, I think that is over. Let's start reading chapter 18, A Usable Past. The past as a concrete historical reality must be viewed as an integral part of the process of unfolding total reality. In other words, in order to understand the things that are happening around us right now, you also have to understand history. Okay, let's continue. The present must be perceived as part of the process constituted by a real historical past dissolving into a real historical future. Only when the present is seen as a continuation of a historical process, as part of history in flux, can the future be consciously shaped. And that is why, my dear lovely children, that, we are studying the past, not just to remember all the people and the dates. It's to see the patterns. It's to see the context, the entirety. Because if we do not know what happened in the past, it's very easy to shape reality right now. So why do you think are all these politicians very, very keen on, showing their own versions of the past? It's because they know that whoever is in control of history is in control of the future. The past should not be the object of mere contemplation if the present is to be meaningful. For if the past were viewed as a frozen reality, unchanging, that's it, and it doesn't affect anything, it would either dominate and immobilize the present, or be discarded as irrelevant to today's concerns. So, in other words, it's very wrong for us to say that what happened in the past is the past. Let's bury it. Let's forget about it. Because the past is not frozen. It's not separate from our current situation. It's what shaped today's reality. The blind dynamics that gave rise to various developing tendencies would not be harnessed, and man would not learn any lessons from history. And, that's just another way of saying, I forgot who said it. Is it Rizal or is it Bonifacio? Or it's just a general like saying that whoever does not know how to look back where they came from will not get to where they want to be. The various justifications for our subjugation emanated from an accurate utilization of the past in order to serve colonial ends. Let's make that simpler. Like, they justified colonizing us by using history. That's the easiest way to say it. Oh, hello, Netzer. It's okay to be late in my class. Please sit down, honey. Thus, our liberation by the Spaniards during the early days of occupation underwent successive rationalizations. And we're saying liberation in quotes because we're not really freed by our friends United States. They didn't really save us. They bought us from Spain. The Americans too projected various rationalizations for their invasions until they were finally able to convince us that they came to educate us and to teach us the ways of democracy. And even until a few years ago, that's still the narrative that's been painted to us in our elementary school, even in high school, that, oh, the very, very kind and benevolent white brothers from the United States came here to save us from the Spaniards who were like treating us so bad. But in reality, that's what they wanted us to think. Hello, I'm a vert dragon. Maybe you're a cousin of mine. I too am considered a dragon, but let's continue. These justifications have become part of our national consciousness, like it's just been accepted as fact. We learned and regard the cultures imposed on us by the Spaniards and Americans as superior, and despite sporadic attempts to assert our national identity, we still tacitly accept the alienation of our own culture and the deformation of our economy as natural and unobjectionable developments. That's why if you go on Facebook and look at stuff that talks about, oh, the national language should have been Filipino and Spanish, blah blah blah. Our grandparents used to know Spanish. You'll see a lot of comments like stupid stuff saying, oh, we should have continued using Spanish. It would have been better for us to learn Spanish instead of English because there are so many job opportunities, blah blah blah. And I'm just sitting there like, do they understand what they're saying? Do they really understand what they're saying? Because if you think about it, Japanese and Koreans, like countries that are ahead of us in terms of technology and finances, let's just be real here, are all struggling with English, yes, but right now there's a lot of them learning it. They're learning it from us. And why do you think so? It's because they understand that, this is what we are using right now as the universal language, the language of commerce. And no matter how much I hate colonization, if I had to choose between the two languages, like Spanish and English, I can clearly see that English is being used more, more commonly for business and trade and communication with the rest of the world. But of course, there would be people who are like, oh no, Spanish is better because our grandfathers spoke Spanish. If you ask any Filipino out there, like, there's going to be a certain percentage that would say, oh, our family has Spanish blood. That's why, if you would look at my grandfather, his nose is very, very high. And you would see that very, very often I mean, you would hear it from random people who don't really look Spanish at all. And that's obviously, it's not that they're lying, but that's what they were made to believe by their ancestors, because it was, you know, it was inculcated to our what do you call these, like our ancestors. It was inculcated in their brains that the Spanish people are better. And even if we don't know that, like personally we didn't experience that, we didn't know why they think the Spanish people were better than them. We've already talked about it, because of the social class stratification and the, you know, what do you call that, opportunities that they're given based on whether they have Spanish blood or not. That belief was passed down generation from generation until, you know, here we are 300 years later, or 150 and some years later, after we were freed from the Spanish people. We still think that having Spanish blood is better, because that belief was passed down from our grandfathers. So that is why it's very, very important to learn history, to learn why people think the way they do in the present, why things are the way they are in the present. And that's not just for Spain, that's also for America, because truthfully, America has received a real Photoshop or plastic surgery in terms of image, because they knew that taking care of the history aspect and the educational aspect of colonization is their most important weapon in order to colonize not just our lands, but also our minds, our culture. FB makes my head ache more than my thesis. Even my grandma. Yes, Facebook. A lot. You know, it's just really, really funny, because Facebook used to be a place where college people, very, very educated professionals met, and then they let in all other people, and now here we are. It's a mess over there. But that's Facebook. Anyway, where were we? Hold on. We look up to our conquerors and appreciate ourselves, like we were talking about earlier. We give respectful consideration to their viewpoints and interests, and defend our own with diffidence, or equate our interest with theirs, when in fact it is not. Nationalist voices have had some impact during the last 2 decades from when this was written, so a lot of decades ago. But the dead weight of colonial consciousness and the continuous influx of foreign cultural influences steadily erodes whatever gains have been made. A study of history which seeks to clarify the genesis and development of our peculiar consciousness can be a powerful factor in affecting our independence, both economic and intellectual. The previous chapters have tried to project the developing tendencies in Philippine history more than the facts, which have been the stuff of most historical writing. And when we say facts, it's the names, the dates, and the titles. We have tried to record the changes in the consciousness of the Filipino in his struggle for emancipation. We're giving context to that. It's not that this happened, and then that happened. They're not separate things. These are all connected by context. And that context includes how are the masses feeling? How is the regular Filipino feeling or thinking about these things that happened to them. These are not things that happened on their own. They involve people, regular people like you and me. Hello, Ivan. We're just introducing this chapter. In this last chapter, it might be appropriate to recapitulate in brief the changing features of that struggle. But before doing so, we should note that the discussion of the progression of the Filipino people's struggles that has been the principal subject of this book does not present the complete picture for the country because of the omission of the separate development of the Muslims of Mindanao and Sulu and other tribal groups in the country. These are rich areas of study that await future scholars. And I would like to stop at this point and just point out how Renato Constantino is very, very responsible in this aspect. Like, he is not just saying, oh, this happened and this is what the Filipino people felt at that time. Okay, sure, he did say that for the past few chapters, but he is clarifying that that does not show the entire picture. This is only the struggles of, the people that he had access to, mostly in the north, which is Luzon. He was saying that it does not really show everything, especially there's a lot of data, a lot of history that has not been recorded about the people of Muslim Mindanao, Sulu, and many other tribal groups. Well, indigenous groups, because back then tribe is what they use. And he is saying that these are rich areas of study that await future scholars. He is not saying that this is what happened and that's all there is to it. This is what we found and this is the entire truth. What he's saying is that sometime in the future there will be people who will be able to put the pieces together. And it's not just something that... Hold on. Let me just... I'm sorry about that. Anyway, what was I saying? He's not saying that this is what we found and there is all and that's the end of that. He's saying that in the future, people like you and me, regular student or teacher or any other scholar, will be able to go back and see where he missed the spot, because he could not, as a person, objectively paint the entire picture of history. Okay. Not yet. We're still getting there, Ivan. World War II, it's kind of getting there. From rebellion to revolution. The inhabitants of the fragmented communities encountered by the Spaniards were politically immature. Living in scattered villages, dominantly ruled by kinship ties, they had no concept of nationality. So when we say politically immature, it doesn't mean that they're primitive as people, that they did not have the capability to rule themselves. It's just saying that their society is still on the development era, wherein from individuals you group together, and as groups you are going to have some sort of hierarchy or roles, and then after that it would gradually develop to something more. It's not that they're not capable, it's just that there was no concept yet of what a whole entire nation is. There's no concept of Philippines back then. Their initial response to foreign conquest were therefore fragmented and ranged from instinctive resistance to foreigners as such to odd accommodation within the new polity. But with resentments building up as economic exploitation, social control produced material hardship and cultural modification, their struggles became successive, quantitative inputs of experience which finally underwent a qualitative transformation from localized revolts against inequities within the colonial order to a national political awareness of the need for doing away with the colonial order itself, that is, from rebellion to revolution. There is a difference between the two. Because of their primitive economic environment, their subsistence agriculture, and the absence of class rule, the early uprisings were localized struggles for redress of grievances in which entire communities took part. So it was not really looking at the entire picture of freeing the entire Philippines. They just wanted the struggles to stop. They were specific actions of a spontaneous nature and without ideological underpinnings. Different villages and regions reacted in like manner to oppression. And they were not in contact with each other. You have to remember, this is before internet, before accessible phone calls. If you wanted to communicate with other villages and regions, you have to send them letters, which took days, sometimes weeks or months to reach whoever they're meant to reach. Awareness of common suffering was the initial factor which produced a sense of supergroup solidarity. So you have to imagine they were tiny little communities and they were on their own struggling. There are farmers who were being abused financially, physically by their overlords back then. In the beginning, it was very, very hard for them to fight back because they know that as a person, as a common man, they did not have the physical strength to combat people who had more guns and like guards who will protect them. They did not have the financial capacity to survive if they left on their own. But when they found out that, oh, I'm not alone in this, other people around me are suffering likewise, they started rebelling because they know that the entire community is suffering from the same thing. They were united by the same oppression. And now that group has solidarity because of that shared suffering, that shared, we can say, trauma from this entire oppression. And then when you look at that from the outside, like you zoom out, it starts to happen again. They realize that, oh, this is not a thing that is exclusive to our little society here. It's happening everywhere that these Spaniards are in. And then that's when they started to identify with each other. The little groups became a super group, which is like a bigger group of composed of tiny little groups. They formed solidarity. The earliest manifestations of protest with a minimal content of demands for the palliation of severe economic conditions took mystical nativistic forms. We have already talked about that. They got leaders who said that, oh, I'm talking to this diwata or this god, and they're telling me that they will support us if we were to rebel against these people who are oppressing us. And then after that, the nativistic form of these groups evolved a little bit, and they started including the Mother Mary and Jesus. But it's still kind of mystical, right? They were backward looking, for in rejecting Spanish rule, they sought to return to the status quo ante, or what was happening in the past. Because in the past, they were like very, very peaceful on their own without the Spanish rule. They were just worshipping the diwatas and the gods and goddesses of the past. And then all of a sudden, these old gods were thrown away because of Christianity that the Spanish brought. Hence, they contraposed their old gods to the god of their conquerors. So now we're moving on to the gods of the Spanish, which is the Christian gods. So it's natural enough to develop that way, since the visible symbol of Spanish power in most communities was the Spanish priest. Subsequent developments in the nativistic form of protest attest to the success of Catholic proselytization. From a total rejection of Catholic religion, nativistic revolts began to engraft onto their old religious traditions some aspects of Catholic dogma and adaptation of Catholic rites, although they became more strongly anti-friar, because the friars are the ones in power back then, as the religious became large landholders. The next step in this Catholicization of nativistic protests introduced a qualitative change. This was the demand for equal rights within the church. The agitation for the Filipinization of the parishes was also part of the demand for equal rights, which contributed to the articulation of concepts of nationhood. Religious confrontations was a principal channel for struggle because Spain anchored her right to rule on the superiority of her religion. So since religion is superior, they're thinking, then why can't we be part of that religion? Although rejection of the Catholic religion had become transformed after centuries of proselytization into demands for equal place within the church, although the cry for the old gods was finally muted by the acceptance of Catholic dogma, the protest movements continued to be subversive because they remained firmly opposed to phylocracy, and because the economic demands which underlay the religious protest were so often directed against friar landlords. The revolutionaries of 1896 made a clear distinction between the Catholic religion and the church as an economic power and co-principal in colonial rule. Hello, Ayano Koji. Welcome to the stream. They retained their belief in Catholic dogma and strongly supported the cause of the Filipino priests at the same time that they demanded the confiscation of church lands and the expulsion of the Spanish clergy. It was only the unremitting hostility of the friars toward the revolution and toward the impulses of religious nationalism that finally produced a demand for a national church unaffiliated with Rome. Identity and hostility. Another aspect of the people's continuing struggle that must be noted in its various levels of development and transformation concerns its leadership. Who were the people leading the revolution? The early revolts against Spanish rule, whether in religious guise or not, were actions which involved whole communities without distinctions as to economic or social strata. If you think about it, that's how they were before the Spanish came. Sure, you have what would you think of as leaders back then, but in general, it was a lot more equal. But the Spanish practice of using village chiefs as administrative conduits, agricultural progress, and commercial linkage with the outside world gradually changed the configurations of traditional village society. So, from a more equal society, as time passed by, the people got used to the idea of there's always someone higher than the masses. They have chiefs. Oh, we are reading Renato Constantino's The Philippines, a pastor visited. And we're just analyzing the revolution and the rebellions that came before it. So, from a very, very equal society, the chiefs became transformed into colonial intermediaries between the Spaniards and the people, and while fulfilling this function, became beneficiaries of colonial rule. They benefited from it in such a way that although they are not Spanish, they were still held at a higher place than the regular person. The Principalia emerged. Experience with colonial power at its lower levels developed a degree of political awareness among principales. Hello, good evening, Sagan. A taste of material wealth from the crumbs of colonial exactions whetted their appetites for more. Because, of course, it is human nature to want more. The situation produced a real, though latent, bifurcation within native society. In other words, there was a divide between the society, the farmers, the regular men, and the Principalia. Instead of being one community, there was a wall between them. The intermediary position of the principales between the colonial power and the people forced them to vacillate between the two, because of course they were still part of that community, whether they liked it or not, whether they think so or not. They had contact with the farmers, but at the same time, they were benefiting from the colonizers. They participated with the colonizer in the exploitation of the people, but since they too were subjected to exactions and suffered, though to a lesser extent, from the same abuses and indignities as did the people, they could also lead the struggles of the masses against the Spaniards. You can think of it this way. When you were in elementary school, you have teachers who would say to you that, oh, today we are going to have a demo teaching, right? And when there's a demo teaching, it's usually either teacher applicants or teachers who are still studying. Now, on a regular day, they would not tell you what to say when there is recitation. They act as, just like your regular teacher. But when there is demo teaching, they will prepare you for it. They will tell you, oh, this is the answer to this, and I will be calling you specifically, and this is what you are supposed to say. So, because it's not just you who's being graded, it's also them. So it's kind of similar to that. The Spanish are ruling not just over the regular people, they're also ruling the principales. And they were also subject to whatever stupid bullshit that the Spanish people were putting them through. you know, but not as much as the regular guys. Hello, Sarah. Good evening, good evening. Where were we? And so, when it comes down to it, the Principalia or the Principales were the ones who could lead the revolts because they had a similarity. They're both being oppressed by the Spanish, but also at the same time, they were seen as someone who was higher because that's what the Spanish established. The Principalia were higher than your regular farmer. And so they tried to lead the revolts. The division emerged more and more clearly as the Principales began to use the people as leverages against the colonizer. Principales who led the revolt sought to replace the colonizers. They were not there to free your regular Joe. They wanted the colonizers out so they could rule, so they could be the ones in charge. They would have the power. They assumed the titles of kings and assigned royal rank to their subordinates in an instant caricature of Spanish hierarchy. The rise of the Chinese mestizos from a racial segment of influential because affluent members of the community provided the people with new native exploiters, but also with articulators against colonial oppression. Inputs of experience. The participation of the people in the various uprisings inevitably endowed them with the beginnings of political awareness. They saw that concerned effort meant they were able to experience the sensation of collective and therefore intensified hatred against their oppressors. Like, think of it this way. If you hate one person, you only know what this person did to you. But if you find a friend who's going to tell you, oh, I hate that person too. They did this and this and that to me. The sin of that person is not just the sin committed to you. Now it doubles because the sins committed to you and the sins committed to your friend add up. And that's what's happening here. Their hatred begins to add up more and more. It doubles, triples, and it just multiplies exponentially because of all the stories that they would hear that their oppressors did to other people. In a few instances, they even rebelled against their own principales. It's not just that they wanted the Spanish out. They can, clearly see that these principales were no better. The latter, however, were minor variations of discontinuities in the struggles of the period, although they pointed to the emerging contradictions within colonial society. The principal continuity was the growing unrest among the people in wider and wider areas of the country, paralleled by the increasing dissatisfaction of the local elite with Spanish rule, which denied them political rights and economic opportunities commensurate with the wider vistas that their own material progress opened before their eyes. The two streams flowing together strengthened each other. The people providing the revolutionary push, the reformist and assimilationist inclinations of the elite, and the elite supplying the ilustrado ideologues and articulators for the national struggle. So although these elite Filipinos, these children of the principales, the children of the mestizos, who had money to go to the US, well, not the US, but to the European countries, they were not exactly aligned with what the people wanted. They had a great role to fulfill because they were educated. They had people who studied, who were educated enough to think for their own and express those struggles. They were the mouthpiece of the masses. unity, and division. The tradition of struggle against a common enemy was a principal factor in forging a consciousness of nationality. The other factor was colonialism itself. Administrative measures, national in scope, and economic policies which resulted in the emergence of a national market welded the separate islands into one country and one people ready to fight an anti-colonial war. The revolution was the culmination of the unarticulated and confused strivings of generations. It was also the final act in the forging of a nation, because prior to the revolution, a national revolution, there was no such thing as a nation. You have these different tiny little groups who were just, they just so happened to be colonized by this external power. And that act of colonization is what actually binds them, because it produced a common struggle between them and a common reason to rise up and protect themselves. And they can only do that if they do it together, if they became a nation. And that was the final act in making a nation, the revolution. At no time were the people more united, yet the seeds of division remained discernible beneath the surface unity, and became increasingly patent when the Aguinaldo forces took over from Bonifacio. Remember that? Flashbacks to a few streams ago. He installed an elite leadership, proceeded to water down revolutionary demands, and finally concluded the surrender at Biak na Bato. Aguinaldo's return under American auspices and his conception of Philippine independence under American protection forecast a second period of vacillating leadership, the implications of which the people were unfortunately unable to comprehend. Intent on pressing their fight for freedom against Spain and later against the United States, they accepted the Ilustrado preemption of leadership without misgivings. But when most of the Ilustrado leaders went over to the American side, because of course they would, they courageously continued the resistance to the new conqueror, although the corrosive effects of defection and their own exhaustion after years of combat took their toll. Hello, Netizer. I have not yet eaten dinner, but I had a snack before I started streaming. I hope you guys are eating dinner right now or have already finished eating. I'll be having mine after our stream. Transmutation of the struggle. Without Ilustrado leadership, resistance became fragmented again and soon developed mystical and millennial characteristics. No, we're not talking about millennials as in people who were born in the late 80s and early 90s. That's a different millennial. As in, we're talking about, 1,000 years. That kind of millennium. It was reminiscent of much earlier revolts. Despite these retrograde developments, these movements kept the resistance to American occupation alive at a time when the Ilustrado leaders of the revolution had already opted for accommodation within the new order. So we came back to basically square one. Well, maybe not one, but very, very early. Despite their ideological and organizational limitations, for all that Americans and their Filipino proteges tried to dismiss their resistance as banditry or fanaticism, These movements were genuine vehicles for the oppression of the people's dream of national liberation and economic amelioration. What do we want to say when we're saying this? It's very easy for the Americans to say that, oh, they're just bandits, to dismiss them. That, it's not like the entirety of the people want to revolt and take us out of the equation. It's just tiny little pockets. That's what they're saying. And then they would also say that, oh, this guy is just basically fooling all of these guys. He has brainwashed them into thinking these stupid stuff, these stupid religious things. And that's why they're committing these acts. But that is not true at all. Although there is a facade of mysticism, and there were acts that may be parallel to banditry, quote unquote. These acts were all expressions of the people's want, their desire to be free from colonialism and the economic oppression that it brings. We have this, saying in Filipino that goes, ang gipit sa patalim kumakapit. Like, if you are back down to a wall, that you have no other choice, you're going to look for something to hold on to, that you're going to be willing to hold on to a knife that would cut your head, not because you're stupid, but because it is your only hope, it is your only chance of survival. And that's why these groups that are based on a religious figure, things like that, they work because the people, they think that this is their only hope, and they're willing to look past all of their more logical, but what if like this, but what if like that. It's because they see no other choice, and so they would believe them. Hello, artist. Okay, let's continue reading. The suppression of the last of the resistance movements gave the authorities a brief respite, but soon afterwards, the age-old inequities in the landlord-tenant relationship began building up unrest in the rural areas. So as you can see, this landlord-tenant clash, whether it was in the Spanish era or the American era, it was always the point of contention. They always had that as a point where it just brings the people to rebel because it's universal. New organizations emerged, especially in the large haciendas in central Luzon, all demanding relief from the exploitative practices of the landlords, and some resorting to sporadic uprisings. In the urban areas, Manila in particular, labor organizations projected their own demands, and it was not long before peasants and workers joined together, having become aware of common objectives and of the need for unity. After the Las Colorum uprisings of the 1930s, the mystical movements all but disappeared. In their place were large, better organized associations of class-conscious and militant peasants whose leaders exhibited growing political sophistication. So just like what we were saying earlier, when these larger, better labor associations showed up, the peasants started flocking to them. That's why the mystical movements disappeared, because the people were desperate, but there is a better option. And so they go there. But despite their militancy, these organizations in general still suffered from a narrowness of outlook. Their enemies were the landlords. Their principal objectives were the attainment of higher wages, a better share in the harvest, lower interest rates on their loans, and less often ownership of the lands they tilled. So, all in all, they just wanted to be treated fairly as human beings should be. Although they still supported the goal of independence, the rank and file had only a superficial appreciation of the fundamental interrelation between their economic plight and the colonial status of the country. Independence as a goal was seen in its political aspect. The implications of a colonial economy were not clearly understood. Distorted perceptions. Several factors were responsible for this inadequate perception of reality. Among them were, first, colonial miseducation, which had distorted the history of the American occupation, Americanized Philippine culture and tastes, and blinded the Filipinos to the drawbacks of a colonial economy. Second, general acceptance of the premise that independence would come as a gift from the United States. And third, the Philippinization of the colonial administration, which concealed American control. Because sure, the Filipinos were up there in the administration, but they were just mere puppets of the Americans. The more politicized among the leaders of the peasants and the workers tried to project anti-colonial and nationalist demands to make the masses aware that American colonialism was a fundamental factor in their poverty and oppression. But the anti-landlord thrust of peasant struggle remained primary, because that is what the masses understand. That is what they are experiencing personally. The anti-colonial nationalist demands, these are a little bit foreign to them. These were concepts, not actual realities that they can see and feel. What's real to them is that these landlords were fucking them over. But by the end of the turbulent 30s, we're nearing 1940s here, the country was faced with the curious prospect of a heightened conflict within the colonial society, with the colonial power practically exonerated from any responsibility for typically colonial problems. The success with which American colonialism was able to escape the onus of responsibility for the country's problems would continue to be a severe drawback in the development of an anti-colonial consciousness, so necessary for the successful prosecution of the struggle for real independence. In simpler words, they made it seem that, they're not really colonizing us, but in fact they are. That's why it was so hard to get the people to, fight back, because they're not really seeing it. In their eyes, oh, we have Filipino leaders, and these Americans, they're basically just helping us. At least some of them. Moreover, such modest advances as had been achieved in creating an anti-colonial consciousness were virtually wiped out with the outbreak of the Pacific War, when all efforts were directed against the common enemy. So now they kind of forgotten about, the Americans are oppressing us, they're colonizers. Now we have a new enemy here. Towards the close of the year 1941, the various forces ranged against each other were forced to subordinate their growing enmity and conflicting interests to confront the immediate task of resisting the fascist invasion. Because, World War II, you have your Axis and your allied powers clashing against each other, blah, blah, blah. The feeling of resentment against the Japanese was genuine, and all throughout the occupation, the people exhibited strong unity against Japanese domination. Everywhere, guerrilla forces could be almost 100% sure of support or protection. It was this near unanimous antipathy for the Japanese that made the resistant groups viable, despite their limited resources. The civilian population amply demonstrated its dogged determination to live under enemy occupation without giving the enemy more than token recognition. From Tojo to MacArthur. The occupation and the resistance that it provoked released historical forces and energies which greatly affected the configuration of post-war national life. The resistance provided the people with another experience and struggle. For the civilian population, it was an exercise in silent dissent, while members of the resistance gained experience in guerrilla operations. Unfortunately, the valuable lesson of the anti-Japanese struggle were to a great extent dissipated by the lack of an independent national goal. On the whole, the people premised their active and their passive resistance on the return of the Americans because, they were still under the Americans after all. Long years of American tutelage and miseducation had trained them to depend on the United States. They could no longer conceive of themselves in actual combat for the real independence of the country, from the Japanese as well as from the Americans. Independence was awaited as a grant. It was no longer to be fought for. Throughout the occupation, many yearned for the good old days, which they considered ideal compared to the deprivations they were suffering under the new conquerors. Thus, resistance was characterized by a general dissatisfaction with the existing master and the longing for the return of the old one. Basically, the Japanese occupation was so fucking horrible that they were like, I wish the Americans were oppressing us instead of these assholes. That's the TLDR of what they were feeling at that moment. Hold on. It's just like, you have a horrible boyfriend, and then one day you get swept away by this new boyfriend. But this new boyfriend turns out to be a fucking asshole as well, and in fact was even worse than your ex. And you're like, I wish I was still with my ex. At least my ex didn't do this or that. They were horrible, but yeah, not that horrible. And then later on, as you see all the stupid things that this new boyfriend is doing, you're like, I miss my old ex. They were kind of nice to me, if you think about it. And you just kind of gaslight yourself. That was what was happening on a national level. Hold on. The naked brutality of the Japanese made the Americans seem all the more benevolent. Because, the Americans were just hush on the DL about their, what do you call this? Their mistreatment of the Filipino people, and the Japanese were out here doing it in the open. Already forgotten was the brutality the Americans had inflicted on our forebears. They kinda had a collective amnesia about that. Most guerrilla groups, no less than the people, were afflicted with the virus of awaitism. They're waiting. Their overriding concern was to dovetail their activities with U.S. military operations in order to hasten General MacArthur's promised liberation. Yes, BF issues. Level is national. Yes.
if I remember my Asian history correctly, at that time, they were fighting for, like, basically they're spreading their, what do you call this? They're spreading their empire because they believe that the sun god uh, was basically their emperor. Or their emperor is the son of the sun god, something like that. But basically, their emperor was God, and there's nothing that these people can do but surrender to Amaterasu, something like that. And then after the entire, Pearl Harbor and things got really fucked up, they realized that, oh shit, he's not God, is he? Basically, that's Amaterasu was the sun god, and then there's a real person who is like, I'm not really sure if he said that he is the son of the sun god or he is the personification, or basically they're just making the people believe that, you know what, I'm basically Japanese Jesus Christ, something like that. So where were we? In central Luzon and parts of southern Luzon, protest over landlord oppression was transmuted into anti-collaborationist struggles, especially against those caciques who acted as the allies of the Japanese. This had a historical significance in the growing consciousness of the people. The traditional leadership once again showed its imminent tendency. Many leaders who had collaborated with the Americans were now the mainstays of the Japanese because, they were, at this point, they were so used to just switching masters. They were like, oh, the Spanish were like giving us power over these peasants, and now that we're done with the Spanish, they're out there, we're transferred over to our new masters, the Americans. And now that the Japanese are here, they were like, you know what, it's in our best it's for our best that we join, or at least good be with the good side of the Japanese, because they it's not their first rodeo. Basically, the peasants now struggled against two entities: their local class enemies and the Japanese conquerors. Say different conquerors, but same shit. But they failed to see that the fight for freedom should have also involved the setting up of safeguards and the defenses in the mass consciousness against a returning power whose aggression has robbed us of the freedom we had already won from Spain, and whose own colonial record here and elsewhere could not inspire confidence that we would be allowed our independence without strings. Freezing the colonial structure. What American liberation really meant became painfully evident as soon as the Americans returned. Those who were considered staunch allies were rewarded. Those who were regarded as a threat to the status quo were isolated and even persecuted. The colonial elite were again called upon to perform their historical role, and history, it keeps on repeating itself. And it did. The Spaniards had been able to transform the chiefs into colonial intermediaries. The Ilustrados compromised the revolution in an effort to preserve their positions, then collaborated with the Americans when they were assured places within the colonial framework. When they were assured leaders from the same upper stratum collaborated with the Japanese. And now the Americans were reimposing the status quo ante with the aid of this same group. These same fucking people. The rich ones. The end of the war saw new shifts in the strategy of the United States in its attempts to consolidate its world economic position. Though now formally independent, The Philippines was forced to undergo a series of adjustments which froze its colonial structure. Hacienderos entered the business and industrial world. Opportunities for new connections with giant American corporations led to the proliferation of banking, commercial, and industrial ventures, which tied these landowning classes all the more to America's apron strings. A new crop of American oriented entrepreneurs and technocrats became pillars of the new economic establishment. New forms of relationship with the metropolitan power gave rise to a new socio-economic milieu. The corresponding political structures, values, and behavior tightened American control. Inevitably, disenchantment spread to wider sectors of the population, a fact which led to new and wider forms of protest and struggle. The neo-colonial status of the country was assured by preserving the economic ties that made the Philippines more and more dependent on the United States. Those who were anxious to dismantle this condition were harassed and persecuted. Imposed on a war-ravaged country, the Bell Act, the Military Bases Agreement, and all other treaties that placed impediments on the country's free development determined the dimensions of the future national crisis. Philippine politics showed more and more its true colonial color as more sophisticated techniques of control were conceived and implemented. A new generation of leaders emerged, products of American oriented education. They were strongly conscious of the decisive power of the United States in Philippine affairs and therefore continued the mendicant policy of securing prior American support for their political ambitions. The American imprimatur was always a necessity for their existence. Bibi, what is imprimatur? If you look at your Bible, it's going to be there. Well, if you have a Bible at home, at least. Imprimatur means this person, usually, I'm not really sure if it's like the Pope or a bishop, someone really high in the Catholic hierarchy, is basically saying, yeah, this is approved. So basically, it's the approval, in this case, of the Americans. It was always necessary for the existence of someone's political ambitions. If you want to be successful in politics, you must secure the okay side of the Americans. That's how it was. Considerations of personal ambition often prevented even those who perceived the tragic implications of American policies on the Philippine economy from making more than feeble, ineffectual protests. Because what protests can you actually do when you're being backed by the Americans? Despite a variety of stopgap measures, the economic situation of the people gradually deteriorated while the colonizers and their local allies steadily appropriated a larger share of the national wealth. The majority who had always occupied the lower rungs of the economic ladder did not have the authority to plan their lives. The poor were not given the opportunity to develop their capabilities through correct education based on their aspirations. Even now, I think, to a great degree, this is still happening. Thus, a poverty-breeding society was nurtured, and the widening gap between a wealthy few and the impoverished majority became an apparently insoluble problem. State power was manifested in various ways, all leading to the suppression of any move for basic change. A bureaucracy with a vested interest in participation in the exercise of power was established. Unproductive expenditures for luxuries was encouraged because the economy provided few incentives for Filipino investors. Skills were developed which would have been useful in a different social milieu. Export crops predominated over produce to feed a vastly expanding population, and the government was burdened with a type of foreign aid which ensured that the debtor would be in constant debt to the creditor. Philippine economic development was tailored to fit the demands of the dominant power and thus meant prosperity of foreign investors and their local partners and continuing poverty for the people. You know what this reminds me of? Like a few months ago, some stupid asshole said that we should be producing, I forgot what fruit or what vegetable, but it's either a fruit or a vegetable that is very, very popular in another country. I think it was Taiwan, and they're saying that, oh, instead of rice, we should plant this so that we can sell it to this other country. And like, bestie, can you hear what you're saying, honey? And then a few weeks or months later, there was like a rise in the prices of onions, and I'm like, bestie, why are you not connecting two and two? And there's another stupid, very, very brain dead motherfucker somewhere in the Congress who asked about developing pills to solve hunger, and I'm just like, bestie, bestie, stop wasting our time. Stop wasting the Filipino people's money for your fat ass to be sitting there saying bullshit like this. Because obviously you do not know what you are talking about. Yes, exactly, the dragon fruit. Oh my fucking god. And like, reading this, you can see that absolutely nothing has changed. Relations of dependence. Anyways, let me just close my door. I'm gonna be back in 2 seconds. Anyway, I said what I said. The person who proposed that, those two things, the dragon fruit and the pills that solve hunger, are fucking stupid. They should not be there. They're a waste of the Filipino people's taxes. They're a waste of space and oxygen in general. They can suck my 2 dicks. Thank you. Relations of independence. Despite the attainment of formal independence, the relationship of dependence was not abolished. Instead, the culture, the institutions, the sciences, and the arts that evolved only served to confirm in the minds of Orthodox Filipinos the need for some form of dependence on the United States. The economy that prevailed reversed development by concentrating not on local needs but on the needs of the foreign corporations. The culture that was popularized produced a built-in affinity for the so-called American way of life, which itself was a distortion because it was a caricature of the lives of the American elite. That was not how the regular American lived back then. The people were maneuvered into abandoning self-reliance and were denied the opportunity to exert their own efforts creatively in order to solve their problems. Reliance on American experts and on foreign models of development became the order of the day. As the economy deteriorated, so did the social fabric. A growing social anarchy which originated in the dislocations of war and was exacerbated by the new type of politics which saw warlordism and neo-feudalism built on the decaying pre-war social system spawned a multiple of problems, as you can tell. The local power elites that developed in every region of the country produced more anarchy with their corruption and their private armies, and thus brought closer to the people the ugly reality of parasitic leaders class that used office for enrichment, a class that are still well and alive today. Just look to your local and national public offices for examples. A general breakdown in morality was the consequence of principally of the example of corruption in the upper echelons of public life. Violence became the norm of conduct. The example of official corruption and the desire to get rich quick, urged on the one hand by the conspicuous consumption of the local elite, and on the other hand by the lack of opportunities for gainful employment, attracted many people to criminal pursuits. Have you seen the movie? Wait, what was that? I forgot the title of the movie. Let me. Is it The Platform? Okay, yes, the movie was The Platform. It was released in 2019. It was a social science fiction horror by Galder Gazdelou Urrutia, and I think you can watch it on Netflix. But basically, it's a vertical prison with one cell per level, and in each level, two people were going to be there. So there's this one food platform that goes from the top level to the bottom level, and there's this huge hole in the middle. And once a day, the platform would go down 2 minutes on each of the levels, and it would be going from the top platform to the bottom, and that's all that they would eat. Only 2 minutes per day, and they're not allowed to keep any, or else they would fucking die. And so you will have people who are very lucky at the top. They would be engorging themselves. Oh, I see. Have you seen it, Sagan? It's very, very horrific. But as you can see, the people at the top, they did not care about the people at the bottom. They saw them as lower than them, not just in the level of the prison, but also as people. They saw them as less than them. And the lower you go, the worse it gets. The lower you go, where people would not be able to eat, they were eating scraps, if anything at all. There was more crime. People would be going to great lengths to basically survive. So you would see cannibalism. You would see people unaliving each other. And if you would just look at the movie as it is, you would think that, oh, it's for the horror of it all. But in society, it's the same thing that happens. It's a commentary on that, wherein you have these few elites at the top, fat with power and abundance, and you have the people at the bottom who are struggling to survive. They resort to crime, to horrible acts, and you would look down and say that, oh, these are savages. They do all these crimes. But in reality, it was the people at the top who refused to help them, who refused to distribute not just the food, but like the power in society equally. They're the ones pushing the people at the bottom to the pits of crime. Now, where were we? Hmm. I would not recommend watching the film for anyone faint of heart because it is very, very graphic. It was very, very disturbing. But I'm not really that affected by those kinds of things. But the message is there that, again, you have the few people who are very, very rich and abundant at the top, not willing to help the people who are below them. Oh, oh, damn. That philosophy teacher was like, yep, I'm gonna give you trauma. Here, have this. But I can see where they're coming from. I can see why they would recommend the film, although again, it's not for the faint of heart. Like, there would be a lot of things that a lot of people would not want to see, namely, like I said, there's cannibalism, there is sexual assault, and many other things. Hold on, where were we? So, a general breakdown in morality was the consequence principally of the example of corruption in the upper echelons of public life. He said what I said, that all this immorality going on, it's all their fault. Violence became the norm of conduct, the example of official corruption, and the desire to get rich quick, urged on the one hand by the conspicuous consumption of the local elite, and on the other by the lack of opportunities for gainful employment, attracted many people to criminal pursuit. Because, like we've said earlier, if you back a person to the wall, they would do unthinkable things to survive. Some joined private armies, others became entrepreneurs of the business of crime. The flourishing smuggling syndicates reflected the corruptibility of law enforcement agencies as well as the Americanization of consumer tastes. Limitations on consciousness. The forces of protest, blind for centuries, misdirected during the middle years of Spanish occupation, preempted during the Revolution, and afterwards muted or distorted by sophisticated American colonial techniques, were once again stirred up to confront a hitherto unquestioned system. But those who sought to organize dissent and channel its attention to the fundamental causes of Philippines' social and economic problems, rather than have it dissipated on peripheral issues, found their efforts hampered, whether they were conscious of it or not, by a number of factors. One such factor consisted of the new inroads that the old pro-American mental conditioning made into Philippine consciousness from the time American forces recaptured the country. While sharp disillusionment with US post-war policies in the Philippines seized segments of the population, soon after the return of the Americans, the majority easily fell victim to the euphoria of liberation because, oh, great, finally we're free from the Japanese who just basically killed us out in the open. We're back to our old lives wherein the Americans can kill us. but not in the open, more hush hush, and then they would call it banditry. A revitalized faith in the United States made all the more difficult the task of clarifying the connection between poverty and imperialism, which, even at the height of pre war militancy, had not been sufficiently projected. This problem would persist over the years without an anti colonial consciousness. The people were unable to register a firm enough objection to their leaders' capitulation to American impositions, which were presented as assistance to bail out a floundering ward and were naively accepted as such. You know, a second factor was the expansion of the petty bourgeoisie stratum after the Second World War. And this heterogeneous group composed of professionals, intellectual workers, petty traders, agricultural businessmen, employees, shopkeepers, etc., was swelled by a greatly expanded parasitic mass of service industry workers and assorted beneficiaries of political patronage and corruption. Petty bourgeoisie values seep down to some extent even to peasant and rural workers lured in by city life and living standards. The consciousness of these groups is characterized by an ambivalent orientation. On the one hand, they have the typical petty bourgeoisie desire for peace and order and the satisfaction of individual material expectations inspired by American institutions and values, because this is what the Americans taught us, and that's what we were striving for. On the other hand, they experience the radicalizing effect of Western concept brought about, however unsystematically, by education and by the desire for equality with the more westernized and affluent sector. Volatile and individualistic, the petty bourgeoisie vacillates between political poles in search of a social order that can satisfy his personal expectations. But once his individual hold on. Where is that? But once this individual interests are practically satisfied, he would readily withdraw from group action because, he got what he wanted. Besides his instability, his individualism makes it difficult for him to accept and to sustain the discipline and subordination of self-interest that organized action for the general good requires. The third factor is to be found in the inadequacies of the dissenters themselves, among these being their chronic inability to work together and their own share of colonial consciousness, which causes them to import foreign models and methods not always suited to Philippine conditions. But perhaps this failing is not so much the product of a colonial mentality as of a lack of knowledge of Philippine reality, part of which is surely traceable to an inadequate understanding of the Philippine past. Now, to sum it up, it was very hard for them to actually bust through the whole, let's get together and keep the Americans out of our asses business. It's because they were educated by the Americans, okay? They were inculcated values that were like, oh, this is what a good life looks like. And what a good life looks like is basically what the Americans, or the richer ones, were having. And what they're envisioning is just basically, if I'm being treated fairly and I am having all the things that I need, then I'm fine. And then beyond that, that's the other people's problems. So once the people who are, you know, fighting for freedom reach a certain point where their needs were met, they begin to lose interest from group action. And they couldn't work together because the things that they've learned is not really applicable to the Philippines because they didn't know much about the Philippines in the past. Because nobody really cared enough to look at the Philippines as a whole before it was colonized. Because they were small little groups of islands with small little groups of people that were, basically independent little societies. There was no concept of the Philippines. And so they don't really have a good written history of what they were like. They don't know themselves. History and consciousness. The history of the people's movements through the centuries has been characterized by a groping for consciousness. The development of a higher level of political consciousness has had its leaps and retreats. And when we say consciousness, we mean it on a national level. Like realizing that we are a nation and that we do not need to earn independence because we deserve it. One important way by which past gains in awareness may be consolidated and developed to higher levels is through the study of history, like we are doing now. When there is an attempt to understand society not in terms of myths and theories, but in terms of concrete experience and sufferings of the people, history acquires practical significance. There is now a use for it. For only if they are armed with a concrete understanding of Philippine reality can the Filipino people act correctly to change that reality. Again, we are going back to the concept that if we do not understand what we are, who we are, what we went through, we can't really change what is happening right now to us. And this still is a problem many decades after this book has been published. And this understanding can come about by a systematic and patriotic effort to synthesize the experience of the past in order to obtain a concrete vision of the future. History then should serve the purpose of integrating seemingly isolated facts and events into a coherent historical process so that a view of the totality of social reality may be achieved. Only then can facts be really understood and not be merely known. Only then can this understanding of facts become an understanding of society. Only then can history be perceived as a unified process. Only then can history have a goal. Now, this is all very serious, but I would like to relate it to the manga that I finished a few days ago. I recently finished Attack on Titan finally after so many years of putting it off. I've actually finished the book, and it made me realize that what happened there was very, very politically charged and could be compared to what is happening to us now, and to our country back then. Because if you would remember, the reason why the people think that they are trapped inside these three walls in Attack on Titan universe is because 100 years ago, a king, I believe it's Carl Fritz. Was it? Yes, I think it's Carl Fritz or Rice. I kind of forgot. But basically, the king has erased their memories and made them believe that, oh, we are the last people on Earth, and the Titans are oppressing us, not knowing that they are the Titans. Right? So, and because they can't remember anything, because the king back then, uh, well, the king and whoever inherits the founding titan has the power to change the physical makeup and the memories of the alien people. They kind of brainwash the people into believing that this is what happened, this is our reality. And so you have very obedient people like cattle inside of these walls, not daring to go out because their reality is what their king wanted them to believe. But the moment that they found out the truth, the actual history, that there are people outside who hated them, that the people outside were trying to kill them, what happened? The people united. The people gathered towards the Jaegerists, supporting them. And later on, after the whole thing happened, there were no more Titans because of their knowledge of what happened to them as a people. They were united and they had their own troops, they had their own military now to protect them from maybe the Marley and the rest of the world. Because that is just what's bound to happen to a group of people who experience the same types of horror. You form a bond between them, and collectively, they become a unit, a force to be reckoned with. And yeah, I think we're being culprits at the moment, personally. Like, history is being rewritten. At least they don't have the founding titans. You can, we can still look into the past. They can try, but there will always be vestiges of the past that they're trying to erase. But yeah. So you see, history is very, very important. As you have witnessed or read in Attack on Titan, you can change reality if you change the past. Even if you didn't literally change it, but you change the people's view of the past. And so a people who do not know their history is subject to all the manipulations that the powers that be want them to think. Where were we? History then should serve the purpose of integrating seemingly isolated facts and events into a coherent historical process so that a view of the totality of social reality may be achieved. Only then can facts be really understood and not be merely known. Only then can this understanding of facts become an understanding of society. Only then can history be perceived as a unified process. Only then can history have a goal. And when history has a goal, the past ceases to dominate the present and to hold back the future. Then, history can be consciously made. And that is the end of this book. Thank you to everyone who has joined me from the beginning to the end. It's a pretty long book. It has like 400 and plus pages. Where was that? Hold on. But yeah. we have finished reading the last chapter of Renato Constantino's Up of the Philippines, a past revisited. And again, once more, thank you to everyone who saved me through all the chapters. I'm still thinking as to what we should read next because honestly, I have the second part of this book. So, the continuing past, Renato Constantino and Leticia are Constantino. Oh, wait, what is that? So, if you want to, we can continue this. This would be um, from the eve of the war to, well, let's see, up to where? Hmm, let's see. We get to recto and then makapagal. We go through a lot of things and we will talk about the CIA. There's a lot of hmm. We can either do that. It's been a year. No, not really. I think I started reading this. Hold on, let me check. I think I can specifically point out when I started reading this book because I do keep my VODs in YouTube. So if you want to look for my old VODs, it's on my YouTube. Just look for BB Bakunawa. I think I'm already at 1K subscribers, although I don't really put a lot of original YouTube only content there. It's mostly a, what do you call this? A storage for my VODs. Hold on. When did we start doing? I started reading this book with you guys when I was still a PNG. That was a very long time ago. I think it was 8 months ago when I started reading this book. It's really hard to go through an entire book on stream. Like, I could probably go through this entire book in 2 days on my own, but we're doing it on stream, so there's that. Hold on. Another option that we can read. Let's finally close that. Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. Hello. This is a short one though. It's not even 200 pages. It's just very, very short. I'm also planning to talk about other things like what else? Um, Local stuff like this one. I've managed to get my hands on a study of Bagobo magic and myth, which I find really exciting. Although this is also a very long book. Let me look at the other books that I'm. We can also actually read Hinilawan. Hold on. Adventures of Humadapnon. So there's that. This one is kind of short. It's like 43 pages. Would you like to read that? Not really sure if it's complete though, but I only have like up to page 88 of this one. Not entirely sure if this is the entire book. Hold on, let me see. What else do we have? Uh, let me just look through my books because I have a lot of books. Hold on. My books are where? All these materials. Oh no, not this one. I'm almost hold on. I've been streaming for almost a year now. Like when did I start streaming? I can't remember. Oh, 9 months. I think. Is it? What month did I start streaming? But yeah, I've started this series of book readings 8 months ago. Hold on. Let me just close the door because oh, I'm also planning to read some more story books. I think I've shown you like the storybooks that I've been wanting to read. Oh, you hear a cat? Yes, that's Chi Chi. She was offended because she was like laying down in front of the door and I had to close it. There's a lot of books that I want to show you. There is Lakbay Masjid. What else? Si Diwayan noong bago dumating ang mga Espanyol. What else? Naging pintor si Tominaman sa Ragog, isang mitong Maranao mula sa mga baybaylawa sa timog ng Pilipinas. What else? Ang unang barangay, ang pamumuhay ng mga Pilipino bago dumating ang mga Espanyol. What else do we have here? Mylan and his toy top, retelling and this is just like a story from hold on. What do you call this? This is an Adarna House book. I've bought this like a few months ago. I didn't have the time to scan them yet. And when I tell you these stories, I would like to have the pictures up there because they're really, really nice. What else? Oh, mga sinaunang hayop sa Pilipinas at matatandang buto ang Homo luzonensis sa Pilipinas. So, we have a mix of history, fiction, and archaeology here. I hope you would be interested in that because it's very, very exciting. I would soon have these books scanned so that we can do a storytelling because, it's gonna be amazing. That being said, what else? Hold on. Let me look for. I am Homo luzonensis. I'm not a Homo luzonensis, but you know what? When I think about it, maybe I am. Maybe I am. What else do we have here? Oh, I can also show you the Soul book. The Soul book is basically a lot of different mythology and stuff about the Philippines. And how many pages is this? This is 162 pages. And as you can see, it's a very, very yellowed out book. It's around 162 pages. But yeah, this is also an option for our book reading. I would love to read all of this with you guys. Because like, if I'm just reading it alone, I'll be just breezing through them. But if we're reading it here, together, we kind of understand stuff a little bit more because we're, slowly breaking it down and doing little commentaries. Hold on, what else do we have here? I have a lot of different resource books that I want to. Hmm. Hmm. There's just so many. I don't know which ones we should do first. Oh, I think I also have this book. Yay! Antonio Figafetta's Relazione del primo viaggio, il torno al mondo. The first voyage around the world by Magellan, chronicled by Pigafetta. Ta-da! So yeah, we can read this. It's kind of slow to load, but like as you can tell. So yeah, this is another option that we can read. What else do we have here that's interesting? Oh, this one. Looking for the Pre-Hispanic Filipino and Other Essays in Philippine History by William Henry Scott. Like, this is, because, we've been talking about history and it's mostly about colonization, so it would be nice to learn more about, the Philippines before we were colonized by these pre-Hispanic. Pre meaning before. So before the Spaniards came. So what were the Filipinos like before the Spaniards came? Yes, in our case, it's pre-colonial as well. But yeah, those are the books that I'm thinking of sharing to you guys soon, very, very soon. What else? What else do we have here? Have I shown you the other one? Yes. Hold on. Another book by William Henry Scott is Barangay 16th Century Philippine Culture and Society. This one is... Oh no. Hold on. Oh shit. I got yeeted out. Hold on. This one, I think you will be familiar with this because it's been showing up a lot here and there. Hold on. These are the iconic pictures. It's black and white here, but I think most of you would have seen these pictures. So these are the tattooed Visayans from the Boxer Codex. And yeah, he refers to that a lot. So yeah, we can read this as well. And you can read about the drinking etiquette, how we get drunk back then. It's just everything about pre-colonial Philippines. What's this one? Oh, this is like the architecture of our houses back then. And boats. This one is a Karakoa. It's not a balangay, it's a Karakoa. Religion, so who are we worshipping? If we are worshipping, what else? Literature, how we wrote, and entertainment, what else? There's just a lot in this book that is amazing. I would love to read these with you guys. So yeah, should I make a poll on Twitter? Probably. You know what? Oh, I have an announcement. Oh yeah. Hold on. So, as you already know, 10 days from now will be, what's that?
Valentine's Day.
So, since it's Valentine's Day, people are thinking of going on dates. Do you have a date? Do you? Do you? Oh, I do. I do have a date because my date would be Moshi Vienna. And you guys, you are third wheeling. Anyway, um, we are going to be, what do you call this? We're going to hold some sort of love advice column. And let me just look for the link because we are preparing for, what do you call that? Ask Tita Bibi and Tita Moshi. So you can anonymously send your questions and we will give you advice because we are very, very nice titas. Well, at least Moshi is nice. Because, like, personally, if it were just me, my main go-to advice is break mo na yan. Hold on, let me just take off my. There we go. Let me just go to our just chatting stream. There we go. Anyway, so yeah, I'm looking for the link because we already made a submission thingy, a Google thingy. What is, I don't know, I forgot. What do you call that? When you have like, oh, a Google form. Yes, we have a Google form. If I can just find it. Where is our Google form? So yeah, if you have like problems in your love lives or the lack thereof, you can always just ask me and Moshi. Hold on. Where is that? I really can't find it. Anyway, I will be posting it on my Twitter, so if you're not yet following me, just follow me there. I'll be posting our... Where? Oh, there it is. I found it. So it's just very, very simple. You just answer one question, tell us your love problem. You don't have to identify yourself. We don't care about that. So I will be putting it up here and then pinning that. So that is our Google form. It's Dear Tita Moshi and Tita Bibi. So if you have love problems, we got you. Confide your troubles. If you have confessions about your love life, we will read it as well as you. As long as it's, it's not too graphic. We're not going to be reading erotica for you. So you have 10 days to write down your love problems. If you need advice on how to get the girl, or how to forget about your exes, or tax evasion. Wait, well, you can just ask me about tax evasion, but for this one, let's keep it to love problems, okay? So that would be our cute little activity on February 14th. We're going on a little tita date with Moshi and me, and we will solve your little problems about love. So what are my qualifications to solve your love problems? Let's see. I'm old. That is one thing. I'm very, very old. I'm old and I'm hot. That's it. I'm old and I'm hot. That's my qualification. Do you need anything more? That's all you need to know. What else? For next week, I still don't have a proper schedule, but I would probably be releasing my schedule tomorrow. Hopefully, we can stick to it. Hopefully, I will not be doing anything out of the ordinary next week. I just want one peaceful week. And I hope that I can actually play Spiritfarer. You know what? I'm beginning to think that this series, this game, is cursed because whenever I am scheduled to play it, stupid shit happens. Like, there's just way too many things that happen to my life whenever I schedule this. Should I just play it on my own? Should I just play something else when I'm with you guys? Because it's it has become tradition that whenever I schedule this thing, things just go haywire. Hello. Good morning, Tan. As I was saying, if you can see the link up there in the pinned chat, that is my Google form for people to send in your queries about love. So me and Moshi will be solving your love problems. And I don't know if I should be saying this, but I've known Moshi for how many years? Like since 2017? 18, 19, 20. Okay, so we've known each other for 5 years. We never had a single fight. Like, we had like some misunderstandings, miscommunication somewhere down the road, but it never developed into a fight. So I guess, I guess I can, like, give you tips about your love life. Because, oh, even with my ex, I never had a fight. Like, I never had an actual fight with my exes. It was all resolved through diplomatic means. So I guess I'm a professional at that. Yeah, so I we will be streaming that on February 14th, and it might become a regular thing because we've been talking about it. Like, it could be a once a month thingy, your dear Tita Moshi and Tita Bibi. So for Tan is not from the Philippines. So Tita just means aunt in the Philippines. Like, that's how you call your aunt. Or even if it's not your aunt, but like they're a close family friend, that's what you call them. What else can we do tonight? Because it's only been, oh, it's almost 2.5 hours that we've been reading. Anyway, after this, I would probably be back to reading or watching stuff. Again, I'm begging of you, if you have recommendations of good BL or GL. I don't read or watch heterosexual love stories. I'm sorry about that. That might be your thing. Good on you, but I I can't I can't enjoy it. Ever since, I've never been into that. But if you have a good GL or BL recommendation, just drop one and I'll be checking it out. I'm currently looking at the director who buys me dinner, the manhwa, because I've already finished the live action version, so might as well read it, right? And please, if you're going to recommend something to me, please don't recommend stuff like killing stalking. Like, just don't. Honey, just don't. I've already finished that, and it was a ride. It was an experience, but will I read that again? Probably not. Will I read something like it again? Absolutely not. Anyway, hold on. Who are live right now? Let's check. I'm going to check who is currently live on Twitch in my. We have Isai. Who else? Hmm. Or do you have like any, what do you call this, recommendations as to who we can raid? Or should we raid another Bakunawa? Interesting. So if you don't know, me and the other Bakunawas have a group chat or a group DM on Twitter. I kind of initiated that, but we haven't really been, you know, scheduling any Bakunawa collabs yet. Maybe in the future if we have time. I'm also trying to schedule a certain collab with some people, but I haven't gotten back to them yet. A lot of things are happening in my life, so I haven't really, checked on people. So I think I'm going to send you off to Bakunawa VT, our Bakunawa friend who is color black. Is like that's how I just identify people now. Oh, this is the one with the black hair. This is the one with the green hair. Because we are all Bakunawas, and I'm just the Bakunawa who I don't know how can I describe myself. I'm the teacher Bakunawa because I guess that's what makes me different. I'm more on the educational side. Like initially, oh god, oh my god. Initially, I didn't envision myself as an educational streamer in the way that I currently am because, as you know, streaming is different from my job. Like, my job is an educator, a teacher, IRL. Why would I include that in my hobby? But here we are. I just had to. So now I'm just the Mokunawa that teaches people stuff. And speaking of teaching people stuff, I might teach you how to do a little bit of palm reading. Would you like that? Palmistry? I've been planning that for a while, but I haven't really scheduled it at all. Maybe next week we can try palmistry for Mystic Monday. Who knows? I just don't know my entire schedule yet. But yeah, I'll just send you off to Bakunawa BT. Hold on, let's look at the raid thingy. I think they are playing The Walking Dead. Oh wait, is that yeah? The Walking Dead season 2. I haven't really checked this game out, but it has very cool comic-like graphics. With the thick black outlines. It's amazing. So yeah, I'll be sending you off there. And I will see you next week, hopefully. Hopefully nothing will happen in my life. I've just accepted at this point that my life is like a K-drama. Like every week or every other month there are exciting things that's happening. But yeah. Where am I sending you? I'm sending you to Bakunawa VT. It was a great evening finishing a book with you guys. That's a relationship milestone between you guys and me. We finished a book together. That's amazing. Bump into a CEO and get a lot of money. I wish I could, honey. I really wish I could. I keep on saying if cause like as you already know, let me just stop my I keep on talking. Let me stop the raid. I have things to say. So, as you already know, I read Danmei books, and one of them is Mo Xiangtong Shu's Modao Zushi, or Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, and I really like a certain ship that's called Xiao, which is basically it's gonna sound really bad when I say it like this. It's the villain and the brother of the main one of the main guys. Like you have two main guys, right? Like they're a love team, and then the one of them has a brother. So I'm shipping that brother and the villain. Please don't make me explain. why. But anyway, so I'm following certain accounts on Twitter that mostly posts about Xiao or that certain what do you call this ship, and there's this one account that was like, if only she could, or they, I'm not really sure about their pronouns, they haven't really been, out and about it, but like if they could only just earn money from writing fics or like doing content about Shio so that they could pay their rent instead of being a slave to capitalism. They're making a rant against capitalism. And I'm just like, honey, when my plan pushes through that I I meet a billionaire, I'm gonna marry him, and he's gonna be like very, very old, and he will accidentally die of natural causes, totally not done by me. It's not my plan. If anyone asks, I am innocent. I will be paying for all of your bills so you can focus on important things. So yeah, that is in my plans, Tan. Bump into a sea. Yes, it's not my fault. I did not poison him. What are you saying? He choked on his own food. Or, I don't know, he slipped and he was caught lacking. I'm so sorry that it's a curse, actually. That was my fourth husband, and they all died of natural causes. I am a natural cause. I mean, I'm all natural. Yes, it's just that they're old, right? It's very, very natural for them to easily break and die if they fall from the top of the grand staircase. Why did we come to this again? So, yeah, this is my legacy. Aside from, just reading history books and story books to you guys, this is my legacy. I will be a four-time billionaire widow. As they say, eat the rich. Anyway, I'll be sending you off to Bakunawa VT, and hold on. How do I do that again? I keep on forgetting how to do things. Technology. This is just how it is. Oh. Yes, we will be distributing the wealth. So we're going to raid Bakunawa VT, and I will see you next week. But until then, au revoir. Adios, annyeong. Zaijian, sayonara. Sampai jumpa. Paalam aking mga minamahal. TV, bye-bye.